CEO's cruel mom invited his ex-wife to his wedding, but when she arrived with twins, the groom's world shattered. Hello, my beautiful Dr. Tom's family. Welcome to my second video. I cannot express how grateful I am to have you here with me today. Your presence fills my heart with so much joy, and I'm thrilled we're growing this incredible family together. If you're here on this video, then you're amongst my first viewers in this family, and it's you that matter most to me. So, before we begin, I want you to register your presence below by typing "Present Dr. Tom" in the comment, so I'll know just how many people are already loving my stories. Then if you enjoy today's story, please subscribe, hit that like button, comment, and share with your friends. Let's get more people to enjoy this daily dose of Dr. Tom's love stories. Now, you've done that. Get comfortable, and let's begin with love. Steven Stadler, at 32 years old, was a self-made billionaire who had completely revolutionized the world of digital marketing. Although Steven was born into wealth, he promised himself he was going to build his empire from the ground up without his success being attributed to his parent. Starting with a small advertising agency in his college dorm room and growing it into what would become the most innovative marketing company on the East Coast, his brilliant mind could see patterns in consumer behavior that others missed, and his campaigns didn't just sell products, they created movements, changed cultures, and shifted entire industries. But despite all his professional success, Steven's heart belonged entirely to one woman, Melissa Perez, a 28-year-old elementary school principal who worked in one of Manhattan's most challenging neighborhoods. Melissa wasn't impressed by Steven's wealth or status. When they first met at a charity gala for education reform, she challenged his ideas about social responsibility and asked him pointed questions about whether his company was truly making the world better or just making rich people richer. Their meeting that night was electric, but not in the way you might expect. While other women at the gala tried to capture Steven's attention with designer gowns and perfect smiles, Melissa stood before him in a simple black dress she'd bought at a department store, her eyes blazing with passion as she spoke about the children in her school who came to class hungry, who didn't have books at home, who were brilliant but lacked the resources to show it. "You have the power to change their lives," she told him that night, her voice steady and uncompromising. "The question is, will you?" Steven found himself completely captivated by this woman who cared more about his character than his bank account. Within 6 months, they were inseparable. Melissa would visit Steven's penthouse office in Manhattan, bringing homemade lunch and sitting cross-legged on his expensive Italian leather couch while she graded papers. Steven would spend his evenings in Melissa's tiny apartment in Queens, helping her create bulletin boards for her classroom and listening to her stories about her students. Their love story was a beautiful contrast of two worlds coming together. Steven's wealth and influence combined with Melissa's genuine compassion and dedication to service created something powerful. They began planning charitable initiatives together, with Steven using his marketing expertise to raise awareness and funds for educational programs while Melissa provided the ground-level knowledge of what schools actually needed. 3 years ago, they had married in an intimate ceremony that perfectly reflected their values. Instead of a lavish society wedding, they exchanged vows in Melissa's school gymnasium, decorated with artwork created by her students. Steven wore a simple black suit, and Melissa chose a flowing white dress that cost less than what many of their guests spent on shoes. The reception was catered by a local restaurant owned by one of Melissa's former students' families, and instead of expensive wedding gifts, they asked guests to donate to the school's library fund. That wedding day represented everything beautiful about their relationship: genuine love, shared values, and a commitment to using their blessings to lift others up. Steven's wedding speech that day still brought tears to Melissa's eyes when she remembered it. Melissa doesn't just teach children to read and write. She teaches them to dream, to believe in themselves, to know they matter. And she's taught me the same thing. She's shown me that success isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you contribute. After their marriage, Steven and Melissa became Manhattan's most unlikely power couple. Steven ran Stadler Marketing Group from their headquarters in a gleaming Manhattan skyscraper, while Melissa continued her work as principal, transforming her school into a model of what urban education could achieve with proper support and innovative thinking. Their shared dream was ambitious but achievable, using Stephen's wealth and business connections to improve education for underprivileged children across the entire country. Every evening, Stephen would come home to find Melissa at their kitchen table, surrounded by student papers, lesson plans, and grant applications. He developed a ritual of wrapping his arms around her from behind, kissing the top of her head and saying, "You're changing lives one student at a time, and you've changed mine completely." These quiet moments together, working side by side toward their shared mission, were the foundation of their happiness. But there was one dark cloud hanging over their perfect life: Cynthia Stadler, Stephen's 58-year-old mother, who represented everything old money New York elite stood for. Cynthia had never accepted Melissa from the very first day Stephen brought her home. To Cynthia, Melissa represented everything wrong with her son's choices. She was too common, too passionate, too willing to challenge the established order. "You're just a public school teacher," Cynthia would say with barely concealed disdain whenever they were alone together. "You have no class, no breeding, no understanding of what it means to carry the Stadler name. You don't belong in our world, and you never will." Cynthia's cruelty was calculated and relentless. At social gatherings, she would introduce Melissa as Stephen's little school teacher wife, with a condescending smile that made it clear she considered this a temporary phase. She would make cutting remarks about Melissa's common background, her discount store clothes, and her inability to navigate high society with the grace expected of a Stadler wife. The humiliation was constant and public. At charity events, Cynthia would steer conversations toward topics she knew Melissa couldn't contribute to: exclusive private schools, expensive European vacations, designer fashion. She would ask questions designed to highlight Melissa's humble origins. "Oh, Melissa, remind me again where you went to school. I don't think I know that institution." Every interaction was designed to make Melissa feel small, unwelcome, and out of place. But what made Cynthia's treatment even more painful was how she disguised her cruelty as concern for Stephen's future. "I'm only thinking of what's best for my son," she would say to anyone who would listen. "He's worked so hard to build his empire. He deserves someone who can truly support him in that world. Someone who understands the responsibilities that come with the Stadler legacy." Despite this constant assault on her worth and dignity, Melissa never gave up trying to win Cynthia's love and acceptance. Her generous heart couldn't understand how someone could be so determined to hate her, especially when she loved Stephen so deeply and genuinely. Melissa would bring Cynthia her favorite orchids every week, remember her birthday and preferences, and always speak respectfully despite the constant rejection and humiliation. "I know she loves Stephen," Melissa would tell herself during the worst moments. "And if I keep showing her my heart, maybe she'll see I'm not her enemy. Maybe she'll understand that I want what's best for him too." This unwavering patience and hope, this refusal to respond to cruelty with cruelty, would prove to be both Melissa's greatest strength and her most vulnerable weakness. Because Cynthia was watching, calculating, and planning something that would test the very foundation of Stephen and Melissa's love in ways they never could have expected. After 2 years of relentless cruelty and calculated humiliation, something completely unexpected happened. Cynthia Stadler's behavior toward Melissa suddenly changed in a way that caught everyone off guard. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Melissa's phone rang, and she was shocked to hear Cynthia's voice on the other end, not the usual cold, condescending tone she had grown accustomed to, but something warmer, almost apologetic. "Melissa, darling," Cynthia said, her voice carrying an unfamiliar gentleness. "I've been doing some thinking about our relationship, and I believe I owe you an apology. Perhaps I've been too harsh, too quick to judge. You love my son deeply, and I can see that now. I was wondering if we might start fresh, maybe spend some time together, just the two of us." Melissa's heart began racing with hope and disbelief. After 2 years of constant rejection and humiliation, could Cynthia really be extending an olive branch? Was it possible that her mother-in-law was finally ready to accept her into the family? "I would love that, Mrs. Stadler," Melissa replied, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "I've always hoped we could find a way to connect." "Wonderful," Cynthia continued, her tone becoming even more warm and inviting. I was thinking perhaps you could cook for me this weekend. I know you come from such a rich cultural background and I'd love to experience that. Would you be able to prepare some traditional Chinese cuisine? I've always been fascinated by the culture and flavors, and I think it would be a beautiful way for us to bond. Melissa's excitement immediately turned to panic. Her mind raced as she tried to figure out how to respond to this request. The truth was, she had never actually learned to cook traditional Chinese cuisine. Her family was Mexican, and while she had mentioned enjoying Chinese food in passing conversations, she had never claimed any expertise in preparing it. "Oh, Mrs. Stadler," Melissa stammered, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. I'm not actually very experienced with Chinese cooking. My family background is Mexican, and I'm much more comfortable with those flavors and technique." But instead of the disappointment or irritation Melissa expected, Cynthia's voice became even more understanding and helpful. "Oh, my goodness, don't worry about that at all, dear," Cynthia said with what sounded like genuine warmth. "I have the perfect solution. I know a lovely young man named David, who teaches cooking classes and specializes in authentic Chinese cuisine. He's absolutely wonderful, charming, knowledgeable, and such a patient teacher. I could arrange for him to come to your home tomorrow and guide you through preparing a traditional meal. Wouldn't that be perfect?" Melissa felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over her. Not only was Cynthia not angry about the misunderstanding, but she was going out of her way to help make this bonding experience possible. "That sounds absolutely wonderful," Melissa said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. "Thank you so much for being so understanding and for arranging this. I really want to make this special for you." What made this timing even more perfect was that Melissa had received the most incredible news just that morning. Her visit to the doctor had confirmed what she had been hoping and praying for. She was pregnant. Not just pregnant, but carrying twins. The ultrasound images were tucked safely in her purse, and she had been planning all day how to tell Stephen the amazing news. She had envisioned the perfect evening, preparing a beautiful meal, setting the dining room table with candles and flowers, and then revealing the ultrasound photos as dessert. The idea of Stephen's face when he saw those tiny images of their babies filled her with such joy that she could barely contain herself. Now, with Cynthia's unexpected gesture of acceptance and the cooking lesson planned, everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. Not only would she be able to tell Stephen about the twins, but she could also share the wonderful news that his mother was finally ready to welcome her into the family. It felt like all her prayers were being answered at once. Cynthia's timing for the cooking lesson was very specific. She suggested Thursday afternoon, during Stephen's regularly scheduled board meeting for the marketing group. That way you'll have plenty of time to prepare everything perfectly, and Stephen can come home to wonderful surprise, Cynthia explained, her voice filled with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm for the plan. Thursday afternoon arrived, and Melissa spent the morning making sure everything was perfect. She cleaned the house thoroughly, bought fresh flowers for the dining room, and prepared the space for the cooking lesson. When the doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, she opened it to find David standing on her doorstep with a warm smile and several bags of ingredients. David appeared to be in his 20s, tall and handsome with an easy charm that immediately put Melissa at ease. He carried himself with confidence and spoke about Chinese cuisine with apparent expertise, describing the techniques they would use and the flavors they would create. "Mrs. Stadler told me so much about you," he said as he set up his ingredients in the kitchen. "She's really excited about this meal and what it represents for your relationship with her. It's wonderful when families can come together like this." As the cooking lesson began, David was indeed a patient and knowledgeable teacher. He showed Melissa how to properly slice vegetables, explained the importance of timing in Chinese cooking, and guided her through the preparation of several traditional dishes. What Melissa didn't realize was that David had received very specific instructions from Cynthia about how to conduct this lesson. Following Cynthia's careful guidance, David began positioning himself closer to Melissa than a typical cooking instructor might. When showing her how to hold the knife properly, he would stand directly behind her, his chest pressed against her back, his hands covering hers as he guided the cutting motion. When explaining seasoning techniques, he would lean in close, his face near her ear as he whispered instructions. During moments of laughter, and there were many, as David was genuinely funny and charming, he would place his hand on Melissa's shoulder or briefly touch her arm. To Melissa, these interactions felt like the natural enthusiasm of a good teacher, someone who was passionate about sharing his knowledge and helping her succeed. But to an observer watching from outside, particularly someone looking for evidence of inappropriate behavior, these interactions would appear intimate and far too familiar for a married woman and her cooking instructor. As they worked together, David kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking about her life, her work at the school, and her dreams for the future. Melissa found herself relaxing and enjoying the afternoon more than she had expected. It felt wonderful to be learning something new, and David's genuine interest in her thoughts and experiences was refreshing. Meanwhile, Cynthia was watching carefully from her car parked across the street, timing every interaction and waiting for the perfect moment to make her next move. At exactly 4:30, just as David and Melissa were laughing together over a mistake in measuring ingredients, Cynthia pulled out her phone and dialed Stephen's number. She knew he would be in his board meeting, but she also knew he would take a call from his mother if she claimed it was urgent. When Stephen answered, his voice was professional but slightly impatient. "Mother, I'm in the middle of an important meeting. Can this wait?" "Stephen, darling," Cynthia said, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine distress. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I don't know what to do. I don't want to say too much over the phone, but what I warned you about Melissa, I'm seeing it with my own eyes right now." Stephen's blood ran cold, but his immediate instinct was to defend his wife. "Mother, I trust Melissa completely. Whatever you think you're seeing, there has to be an explanation." But Cynthia's voice became even more shaky and urgent. "Please, Stephen, I know how much you love her, and I don't want to cause problems. But there's a man here with her in your kitchen, and please just come home. See for yourself. I pray I'm wrong about what I'm witnessing." The line went dead, leaving Stephen staring at his phone in shock and growing dread. Stephen left his board meeting in the middle of a crucial presentation, his mind racing with confusion and dread as he drove through Manhattan traffic toward his home. His mother's trembling voice kept echoing in his head, but every fiber of his being wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. Melissa had never given him any reason to doubt her loyalty or love. She was the most honest, genuine person he had ever known. But as he pulled into his driveway and saw an unfamiliar car parked outside their home, his chest began to tighten with an emotion he had never associated with his marriage: fear. Not fear of physical danger, but fear of having his entire world turned upside down. Stephen used his key to enter quietly through the front door, and immediately heard the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. It was Melissa's laugh, bright and joyful, mixed with a man's voice he didn't recognize. He moved slowly down the hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he reached the kitchen doorway, the scene before him stopped him cold. Melissa stood at the stove stirring something in a large wok, while a handsome man in his 20s stood directly behind her, his arm draped casually around her shoulders as he pointed at something in the pan. They were both laughing, completely absorbed in whatever they were doing together. Stephen's rational mind tried to process what he was seeing. This could be innocent. This could be exactly what it appeared to be: someone helping his wife with cooking. But the intimacy of their body language, the comfortable way this stranger touched his wife, the joy on Melissa's face as she interacted with another man in their most private space, it created a visual that hit Stephen like a physical blow. His heart said to trust Melissa, to believe in the love they had built together over 5 years. But his eyes were showing him his wife in the arms of another man, laughing and comfortable in a way that made his chest feel like it was being crushed by an invisible weight. The jealousy that coursed through him was unexpected and overwhelming. He had never experienced anything like it because he had never had reason to doubt Melissa's faithfulness. For several seconds Stephen stood frozen in the doorway watching this scene unfold. Every laugh, every casual touch, every moment of apparent intimacy between his wife and this stranger felt like a knife twisting in his heart. Finally, he found his voice, though it came out harsher and more wounded than he intended. "What is?" Both Melissa and David spun around in surprise. Melissa's face immediately lit up with excitement and joy when she saw her husband standing there. "Stephen," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with happiness. "You're home early. Look, your mother asked me to cook for her. She wants to try traditional Chinese cuisine, and David is teaching me how to prepare it properly. Isn't this wonderful? She's finally accepting me, She's finally ready to connect with me. But Stephen couldn't hear the joy in her voice or process the explanation she was giving him. All he could see was his wife standing close to another man in their kitchen, both of them flushed and laughing together. All he could think about were the months of subtle comments his mother had made about Melissa being too loose, too naive, too untrustworthy. "Don't lie to me, who is this man, Melissa?" Stephen asked, his voice tight with pain he was trying to control. "This is David," Melissa replied, still smiling, still not understanding the storm that was building in her husband's eyes. "He's a cooking instructor. Your mother arranged for him to come help me prepare this meal for her." At that exact moment, as if she had been waiting for this precise instant, Cynthia appeared in the kitchen doorway behind Stephen. In her hands were official-looking papers, perfectly prepared and ready. "Melissa, darling," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with false sorrow and disappointment. "Even after you've been clearly caught, you still want to lie and say it was me who arranged this. Son, can you now see the kind of deceptive woman you married? This is exactly what I tried to warn you about." Stephen's emotional state was already fragile, and his mother's words hit him like gasoline on a fire. The papers she thrust into his hands were divorce documents, complete and detailed, as if she had been preparing for this moment for months. Without thinking, without allowing Melissa to explain further, Stephen grabbed the papers and held them out toward his wife. "I trusted you with everything," he said, his voice breaking with pain and betrayal. "I gave you my heart, my home, my entire life. How could you do this to us?" Melissa's joy crumbled instantly into devastating confusion. The excitement about Cynthia's acceptance, the happiness about the cooking lesson, the anticipation of sharing her pregnancy news, it all shattered in an instant. "Stephen, I don't understand what your mother is saying," Melissa pleaded, her voice shaking. "We were just cooking for her. David was just helping me learn the recipes. This was supposed to be a surprise for both of you." David, who had been standing awkwardly to the side during this confrontation, suddenly realized he had been used as a pawn in something much darker and more complex than he expected. The tension in the room, the divorce papers, Cynthia's accusations. It all became clear to him that he had been manipulated into participating in the destruction of this marriage. David quietly gathered his ingredients and fled through the back door. As David left, Melissa fell to her knees on the kitchen floor, tears streaming down her face as she looked up at the husband she adored. "Please, Stephen, you have to believe me," she begged, her voice breaking with desperation. "I would never betray you. I love you more than my own life. Your mother asked me to do this. She said she wanted to connect with me, to enjoy my cooking. I thought she was finally accepting me into the family." But Stephen, his heart shattered and his mind poisoned by what he had seen in his mother's manipulation, couldn't see past his pain. The visual of his wife with another man was burned into his memory, and every explanation felt like another lie. "I can't look at you right now," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can't even be in the same room with you." What Stephen didn't know, what he couldn't hear through his emotional anguish, was that Melissa had been planning to tell him the most wonderful news of their lives that very evening. The ultrasound photos of their twins were still in her purse, waiting for the perfect moment that would now never come. Her pregnancy, their babies, the future they had dreamed of together, all of it died unspoken in that kitchen, as their marriage collapsed around them. In the days that followed after the divorce, Melissa tried desperately to reach Stephen and explain what had really happened. She sent text messages about her pregnancy, called repeatedly, even showed up at his office building. But Cynthia had already anticipated these attempts at contact. She had accessed Stephen's phone and blocked every number Melissa might use to reach him. She had instructed building security to turn Melissa away if she tried to visit. When Melissa sent letters to their home, Cynthia intercepted them. When she tried to call Stephen's office, Cynthia had already spoken to his assistant about protecting Stephen from harassment by his unstable ex-wife. Every avenue of communication was systematically cut off. Melissa's desperate messages about being pregnant with his children never reached Stephen. Her explanations about the cooking lesson, her pleas for him to listen to her side of the story, her promises that she had never betrayed him, none of it got through the wall that Cynthia had built around her son. After weeks of failed attempts to contact him, after being turned away from every place she thought she might find him, after her letters went unanswered and her calls went unreturned, Melissa finally gave up. Heartbroken and carrying twins she would have to raise alone, she packed her few belongings and moved across the country to Portland, Oregon, where she could start over and try to build a life for herself and the children Stephen would never know existed. The last thing she did before leaving New York was leave one final message on an old phone number she hoped he might still check. "Stephen, I'm carrying your babies. Twins. I'll always love you, and I'll make sure they know their father is a good man who lost his way." But even that message never reached him. Cynthia's plan had worked perfectly. 7 years passed, and Stephen Stadler had become one of the most successful businessmen on the East Coast. But success felt hollow and meaningless without the woman he had loved more than life itself. Every single morning, Stephen woke up in his empty penthouse and felt the crushing weight of Melissa's absence. Her side of the bed remained untouched. Her coffee mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet where she had left it, and her favorite books remained exactly where she had placed them on the nightstand. Despite his mother's constant assurances that he had made the right choice, despite the divorce papers he had signed in a moment of devastating pain, Stephen's heart never stopped aching for Melissa. He would catch himself looking for her face in crowds, hoping against hope that he might see her walking down the street or sitting in a cafe. Every brunette woman who passed by made his heart race for just a moment before reality crashed back in. The worst part was that Stephen still believed Melissa had betrayed him with another man in their own home. The image of her laughing with David, the memory of that stranger's arm around her shoulders in their kitchen, remained burned into his memory like a scar that never healed. He couldn't understand how the woman he had trusted completely could have done something so devastating to their marriage. Cynthia's plan had worked with devastating perfection. She had successfully convinced her son that his wife was unfaithful, and she had done it using evidence that seemed irrefutable. Stephen's own eyes. No amount of explanation could compete with what he thought he had witnessed that terrible afternoon. Stephen threw himself into his work with an intensity that worried even his closest business partners. Stadler Marketing Group expanded internationally, opened offices in 12 countries, and became the most innovative marketing firm in the world. Stephen's campaigns won every major industry award, and his company's valuation reached heights that made financial headlines worldwide. But all the professional success in the world couldn't fill the Melissa-shaped hole in his heart. His employees noticed that their brilliant, charismatic boss had become distant and mechanical. He made smart business decisions, but the passion and joy that had once driven his creativity seemed to have vanished completely. After 3 years of watching her son suffer in isolation, despite her role in creating that suffering, Cynthia began pressuring Stephen to move on romantically. She introduced him to Cassandra Wellington, the daughter of another prominent marketing family and an heiress to a considerable fortune in her own right. Cassandra was everything Cynthia had always wanted in a daughter-in-law. She came from old money, understood high society, spoke multiple languages, and had attended the finest schools. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and perfectly suited to be the wife of a successful businessman. Most importantly, she was nothing like Melissa. Stephen didn't love Cassandra, and he was honest with her about that from the beginning. But Cassandra was a practical woman who understood that many successful marriages were built on mutual respect and shared goals rather than passionate love. She wanted children and a stable family life, and Stephen could provide both security and status. "I know your heart belongs to someone else," Cassandra told him during one of their early conversations about marriage. "But perhaps we can build something good together anyway. I don't need to be your great love, Stephen. I just need to be your partner." Stephen agreed to marry Cassandra primarily to please his mother and to have the children he had always dreamed of having with Melissa. He hoped that fatherhood might fill some of the emptiness in his life, that building a family would help him finally move past the pain of his first marriage. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Portland, Oregon, Melissa was raising twin daughters who would have taken Stephen's breath away if he had ever seen them. Shayla and Sophia Perez were 7 years old, and absolutely unmistakable as Stephen's children. They had inherited his dark hair, his intelligent eyes, and most remarkably, his brilliant strategic mind and natural leadership abilities. Melissa worked as the principal of Roosevelt Elementary, an inner-city school that served some of Portland's most underprivileged children. Just as she had done in New York, she transformed the school into a beacon of hope and educational excellence. Her own daughters attended the school, and they were beloved by both students and teachers for their kindness, creativity, and remarkable intelligence. Shayla was the more outgoing of the twins, with a natural charisma that drew people to her. She organized fundraisers for the school library, created mentorship programs, pairing older students with younger ones, and had a gift for public speaking that reminded everyone of her father's persuasive abilities. Sophia was quieter but equally brilliant, with a talent for strategic thinking that was remarkable in someone so young. She designed marketing campaigns for school events that were so sophisticated they caught the attention of local businesses, who began asking this 7-year-old for advice on their own promotional materials. Both girls constantly asked about their father, and Melissa always gave them the same careful answer. "Your daddy is a very important man, who built something wonderful in the world, but he lost his way because someone convinced him that love wasn't real. He doesn't know about you yet, but someday when the time is right, I believe you'll meet him." The twins would create elaborate projects hoping to impress the father they had never met. Shayla wrote stories about brave business leaders who helped children around the world. Sophia designed imaginary companies that combined their mother's passion for education with their father's talent for marketing. They both dreamed of the day when they would finally get to show their daddy how much they had learned and how proud he would be of them. Every year on their birthday, Melissa would show them photos from her wedding to Stephen and tell them stories about how much their father had loved education and children. She was careful never to speak badly about him despite the pain he had caused her. She wanted her daughters to know that their father was a good man who had made a terrible mistake. 7 years after the divorce, just as Stephen was preparing to marry Cassandra, in what promised to be Manhattan's social event of the year, Melissa received an unexpected package in her mailbox. Inside was an elegant wedding invitation on cream-colored paper with gold lettering, announcing the marriage of Stephen Stadler to Cassandra Wellington. Attached to the invitation was a handwritten note from Cynthia that was designed to be cruel. "Stephen has found someone worthy of the Stadler name, someone who understands loyalty and class, someone who would never bring strange men into her husband's home. I thought you should see how well he's moved on from your betrayal. He's finally going to have the family he always deserved." But instead of it destroying Melissa as Cynthia had intended, the invitation gave her a surge of courage and determination she hadn't felt in 7 years. Looking at her daughters, who were asking questions about the fancy invitation, Melissa made a decision that would change all their lives forever. "Girls," she said quietly, "I think it's time you met your daddy. Have you ever been separated from someone you loved because of lies and manipulation? Share your experience in the comments." The Peninsula Hotel in Manhattan had been transformed into a fairy tale wedding venue, with 500 of New York's most elite guests filling the opulent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white roses and gold accents, while a string quartet played classical music as guests took their seats for what society columns were calling the wedding of the decade. Stephen stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looking every inch the successful billionaire groom. Beside him stood his groomsmen, all prominent figures in the business world, while Cassandra's bridesmaids arranged themselves in elegant formation wearing flowing champagne-colored dresses. The scene was picture-perfect, the kind of wedding that would grace the pages of luxury magazines and social media feeds for months to come. But despite the grandeur surrounding him, Stephen felt like he was going through the motions of someone else's life. As he waited for Cassandra to walk down the aisle, his mind wandered to another wedding 7 years ago, a simple ceremony in a school gymnasium, decorated with children's artwork, where he had married the love of his life in front of people who truly mattered to them. Even on what should have been one of the happiest days of his life, Stephen couldn't stop thinking about Melissa. He wondered where she was, whether she was happy, whether she ever thought about the life they had planned together. The guilt of these thoughts made him feel like a fraud standing at this altar, preparing to make vows to a woman he respected but didn't love. Cassandra appeared at the end of the aisle, stunning in a designer gown that had cost more than most people's annual salary. She walked with grace and dignity, her smile perfect for the photographers capturing every moment. As she approached the altar, Stephen tried to push thoughts of his first wife out of his mind and focus on the woman who was about to become his second. The ceremony proceeded smoothly, with all the traditional elements that Cynthia had insisted upon. The officiant spoke about love, commitment, and the joining of two families while Stephen repeated the words he was supposed to say without feeling any of the emotion behind them. Cassandra's responses were equally proper and dignified, both of them playing their roles in this elaborate performance for New York society. Just as the officiant was asking if anyone objected to the union, the massive ballroom doors opened with a dramatic flourish. Every head in the room turned to see who would dare interrupt such an important ceremony. What they saw made the entire gathering fall into stunned silence. Melissa Perez walked into the ballroom with quiet confidence, holding the hands of two 7-year-old girls who were so obviously Stephen's daughters that several guests audibly gasped. The resemblance was unmistakable. Both children had Stephen's dark hair, his intelligent brown eyes, and the same determined set to their jaws that anyone who knew Stephen would recognize immediately. Shayla, the more outgoing of the twins, looked around the opulent ballroom with wide eyes and spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the silent room. "Mommy, is this really where our daddy works? It's so much fancier than your school." The words hit the assembled guests like a thunderbolt. Stephen felt his knees go weak as he stared at these two little girls who looked exactly like him. His mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing, trying to understand how this was possible. Melissa walked slowly down the aisle, her daughters on either side of her, approaching the altar where Stephen stood frozen in shock. She had dressed simply but elegantly in a navy blue dress, her hair pulled back in the same style she had worn when they were married. She looked older, more mature, but still beautiful in the way that had first captured Stephen's heart all those years ago. Sophia, the quieter twin, approached the altar carrying a small poster board that she had clearly made herself. With the innocent confidence of a child who didn't understand the magnitude of the moment, she held it up towards Stephen. "We made this for you, Daddy," she said in her sweet, clear voice. "Mommy said you're really good at making people believe in things, so we designed a campaign for our school fundraiser. We wanted to show you what we learned." The words cut through Stephen like a physical blow. These children, his children, had been creating marketing projects hoping to impress a father they had never met. They had inherited his strategic mind, his creative vision, and they had been using those gifts while growing up without him. Stephen fell to his knees on the altar steps, overwhelmed by emotion and the devastating realization of what he was seeing. Tears began streaming down his face as he looked into the eyes of daughters he never knew existed. Shayla, seeing her father's emotional reaction, approached him with the fearless directness that children possess. Her eyes, so much like his own, held a mixture of hope and hurt that broke his heart completely. "Daddy," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "why didn't you want to know about us? Mommy said she tried to tell you we were coming, but you wouldn't listen. Were you angry at us before we were even born?" The innocent question shattered Stephen completely. His voice came out as barely a whisper. "What do you mean she tried to tell me you were coming?" Melissa stepped forward, her hands shaking as she pulled out an old phone from her purse. With trembling fingers she showed Stephen screenshot after screenshot of blocked text messages, all dating back 7 years to the time period right after their divorce. "I tried to reach you for months about our babies," she said quietly, her voice breaking with years of suppressed pain. "I sent you messages about the pregnancy, about the ultrasound appointments, about when they were born. I tried to call, I wrote letters, I even came to your office building, but every message was blocked, every letter was returned, and security always turned me away." Stephen stared at the phone screen, seeing message after message marked as blocked by his account settings. Messages about doctor's appointments, about morning sickness, about the twins' birth, about their first words and first steps, 7 years of communication that he had never received. "I never saw any of these," he whispered, his voice filled with horror and growing understanding. "I never knew about the pregnancy. I never knew about them." At that moment, all eyes turned to Cynthia, who had been watching this scene unfold with growing panic. The mask of righteousness she had worn for 7 years was finally slipping under the pressure of undeniable evidence. "I had to protect you," she said, her voice shaking as she realized her deception was being exposed in front of 500 witnesses. "She wasn't right for our family. Everything I did was to save you from a mistake." Stephen's face transformed with a mixture of rage and devastation that was terrible to witness. "You stole 7 years of my children's lives from me," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "You destroyed my family." The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as Stephen turned away from his mother completely, focusing entirely on Melissa and the daughters he had never known. Cassandra, who had been standing at the altar watching this drama unfold, quietly removed her engagement ring. "Go to them, Stephen," she said with remarkable dignity and grace. "I can't marry someone who's still in love with someone else. Just go with them. I'm done here." Without another word, Stephen stepped away from the altar and knelt down to embrace the daughters he should have known from birth. While Melissa stood nearby, tears streaming down her face as she watched the reunion she had dreamed of for 7 long years. The fairy tale wedding had become something else entirely, the moment when a family torn apart by deception finally found their way back to each other. The months following that dramatic wedding day were filled with careful, patient work as Stephen, Melissa and their daughters began the delicate process of rebuilding what had been torn apart by 7 years of separation and deception. Stephen immediately canceled his honeymoon plans with Cassandra and instead flew to Portland with Melissa and the twins, determined to start making up for all the time he had lost with his children. Those first weeks were both beautiful and heartbreaking. Stephen watched in amazement as Shayla and Sophia showed him around their world. Their small apartment filled with school projects and handmade decorations, their mother's school where they were beloved by every student and teacher, their favorite parks and bookstores where they had spent countless afternoons dreaming about meeting their father someday. Every day brought new revelations about the incredible children he had missed raising. Shayla's natural leadership abilities reminded him so much of himself at that age, while Sophia's strategic thinking and creative problem-solving were gifts that clearly came from both parents. They had inherited Melissa's compassion and his business acumen, creating personalities that were uniquely their own but unmistakably connected to both their parents. Stephen also had to confront the painful reality of how much Melissa had sacrificed to raise their daughters alone. She had worked multiple jobs while completing her graduate degree, had spent countless nights helping with homework and school projects without a partner to share the load, and had answered years of questions about their absent father with grace and patience that amazed him. The rebuilding process wasn't easy. There were difficult conversations about hurt feelings, missed milestones, and the challenge of learning to trust again after such devastating betrayal. Stephen and Melissa attended family therapy sessions together, working through their complex emotions with professional help while also learning how to co-parent children who were meeting their father for the first time. Both twins had questions that were sometimes hard to answer. Why hadn't Daddy wanted to know them before? Why had Grandma Cynthia lied about the messages? Would their parents get married again? Or were they just going to be friends? Stephen and Melissa answered each question with honesty appropriate for 7-year-olds. Always emphasizing that the adults had made mistakes but that the love between family members was real and strong. As the months passed, Stephen proved his commitment to his newfound family through consistent action rather than just words. He moved his primary residence to Portland, opening a West Coast office for Stadler Marketing Group so he could be present in his daughters' daily lives. He attended every school event, helped with homework, and slowly began building the father-daughter relationships he should have had from the beginning. The breakthrough moment came 6 months after their reunion, when Stephen asked Melissa to marry him again, not in a grand gesture, but quietly, while they watched their daughters playing in the backyard of the house they had bought together in Portland. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said, taking her hand, "but if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost and building the future we always dreamed of." Melissa's yes was quiet but filled with the kind of joy that comes from genuine healing and renewed hope. Their second wedding was everything their first wedding had been: simple, meaningful, and focused on what truly mattered. They chose to marry at Roosevelt Elementary School, in the same gymnasium where Melissa had worked so hard to transform the lives of her students. The decorations were handmade by Shayla and Sophia, with help from Melissa's current students who were thrilled to be part of their principal's special day. Instead of 500 society guests, they were surrounded by people who had supported them through difficult times. Melissa's colleagues, parents of her students, Stephen's employees who had become genuine friends, and most importantly, their daughters who served as flower girls with enormous pride and excitement. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, Sophia raised her small hand with complete seriousness and announced, "We object to waiting any longer for Daddy to move in with us." The laughter that filled the gymnasium was genuine and joyful, the kind that comes from people who have been through darkness together and found their way back to light. 2 years into their renewed marriage, As the family had settled into a rhythm of genuine happiness and healing, they received unexpected news that would test Melissa's capacity for forgiveness in ways she never anticipated. Cynthia had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and had perhaps 6 months to live. Stephen's first reaction was swift and uncompromising. When his mother appeared at their Portland home, tears streaming down her face, he immediately moved to shield his family from her presence. "I'm dying," Cynthia whispered, her voice broken and desperate. "Please, I know I don't deserve it, but let me know my granddaughters before I go. Let me try to make amends for the terrible things I've done. Security, please guide her out of my house." Stephen said immediately, his anger still burning bright after all this time. "You destroyed our family once. I won't let you hurt them again." But Melissa, with the same generous heart that had always tried to see good in people, even those who had hurt her deeply, gently touched Stephen's arm. "I've forgiven her," she said quietly, her words shocking everyone present. "She's going to die, Stephen. Despite everything she did to us, she's still Shayla and Sophia's grandmother. Let them know her, and let her know them. It doesn't excuse what she did, but maybe it can bring some peace before the end." Stephen's reluctance was clear, but he had learned to trust Melissa's wisdom and her remarkable ability to choose love over bitterness. Reluctantly, he allowed Cynthia into their lives for her final months. Those last months were filled with a complex mixture of pain, healing, and unexpected grace. Cynthia spent her remaining time telling the twins stories about their father's childhood, sharing family history that Stephen himself had forgotten, and expressing deep, genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. When Cynthia passed away peacefully in a hospice facility, surrounded by the family she had almost destroyed, Stephen held Melissa close and whispered words that captured the profound lesson of their journey together. "Your capacity to forgive made you the better person," he said, his voice filled with admiration and love. It always did. Their love had not only survived deception and separation, but had grown stronger, proving that truth and genuine love always triumph over manipulation and lies when given the chance to heal. As we reach the end of Stephen and Melissa's incredible journey, I want us to pause and reflect on the profound lessons their story teaches us about the resilience of the human heart and the power of authentic love. Their story proves that love tested by deception and manipulation can emerge not just intact, but stronger than before. When love is real, when it's built on genuine connection, shared values, and mutual respect, it has the power to survive even the most devastating betrayals. Truth, no matter how deeply buried or how cleverly hidden, always finds a way to surface. It may take 7 years. It may require incredible courage, but truth cannot be suppressed forever. Most powerfully, Melissa's story shows us that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the ultimate demonstration of strength. When she chose to forgive Cynthia in those final months, she wasn't excusing the terrible harm that had been done. She was freeing herself and her family from the prison of anger and resentment that could have poisoned their happiness for generations. Stephen and Melissa's story reminds us that love isn't just a feeling we experience. It's a choice we make every single day. They chose to fight for their family, to rebuild trust brick by brick, and to create something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. They chose to believe that their love was worth fighting for, even when everything seemed lost. My beautiful Dr. Tom's family, thank you for taking this emotional journey with me today. Your presence, your comments, your willingness to open your hearts to these stories, it means everything to me. I know that many of you have faced your own battles with deception, betrayal, and the challenge of forgiveness. Your stories matter too, and I encourage you to share your experiences in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of love, truth, and redemption. Together, we're building a family that believes in healing, hope, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Until next time, remember, your love story is still being written.